mainstream is not happening, but hopefully our books and our plays do go into the mainstream. So how do you feel, and what would you want from your books and your plays, Frank and Ishmahil? I'll direct that at Ishmahil because he's just come back in, and Frank, we'd love to hear what you think about that as well.
I will say is, and it's very difficult to say this, but I've never sort of looked at the mainstream market. You know, the mainstream market is not our focus in terms of rice and peas. I've always sort of really looked at the audience who we're catering our material for and served that kind of audience, and I've seen everything else as being extra. So I haven't really necessarily looked at the mainstream audience.
Okay.
Hello. Oh, sorry. I thought it'd be cut because it all frozen. What I will say though is the importance and significance of bookshops like Grassroots, Head Start, the Uprising. All of these bookshops are really, really important and intrinsic in terms of my education. I was expelled from school. I was educated in both here in the UK and in the United States. And both educational systems are just as dysfunctional as ours, perhaps more so in the US to some degree, because when I first started school in the US, my first day in school, I'm like 14, 15 years old, and the kid next to me has a gun tucked in his waistband. I'd never kind of been in situations like that before. Those spaces were not meant to educate us. They were meant to occupy us until we turn 18 and either enter jail or end up in a graveyard. Do you know what I mean? So as a young youth who felt I was intelligent to some degree, I would always be frequenting all of the sort of black bookshops, and that was the basis of my kind of education. You know, I was hearing, about, Gus John and Cecil and John LaRose, and all of these characters were heroes to me growing up, and that I could, in some ways I wanted to be like them. Cecil's done much more work than just in terms of what's on the tin. I remember my sister telling me about how he'd represented her or a group of others at a tribunal. In terms of stories about what's going on around the Grove, Cecil sort of stepped in and a part as well as sort of doing Black history at the Metro Club. Also arbitrated when the Metro Club was being seized back by Ilya. Do you know what I mean? So in terms of my education, I have so much, I owe so much. And even to characters like Courttia and all the others that's involved in this panel. Geoff, if you look at what you've got here, we've all, I think everyone to some degree has played a part or some part in a way of sort of continuing that trajectory. And now that we've got this sort of Black Lives Matter, George Floyd scenario happening, whereby young people are coming up and gaining some level of consciousness, it's important for us to lay that foundation for them, so that they have the right kind of stepping stones in order to move forward. Because we cannot rely upon this educational system, or even what they may be proposing next year. Because that I'm hearing talk that they're going to be introducing certain things within the curriculum, but we know whatever they introduce is going to be something that's watered down and really not meant to empower us in any real capacity.
Ishmahil,
so we should not kind of get complacent.
Ishmahil, you talked about young. We've got Trey on the panel. Not heard enough from the young voices.
Hang on. Can I just cut you there? Sorry. Because Frank has got to go, so we'll come back to Trey. Sorry.
I'm about to go myself now, but I'm looking at people who haven't spoken. It's been a very long time, but it's wonderful what you've done. Tony Sewell, unfortunately, is a person the government are going to invest in to tell us what we should be doing. Try not to laugh, Gus. Try not to laugh, Cecil. Tony Sewell is the one they've gone to. Thank all of you for allowing me to interrupt, and I tried to help facilitate.
Yeah, thank you for helping us out and giving us some encouragement and positive
thank you very much.
Support.
Thank you, Geoff.
Thank you, Geoff.
Much love.
Yeah.
Thanks, Geoff.
Hey, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether lobbying the schools will help, but my own experience, I learned more about Black culture and read more Black books in institutions that I went to than I did at any school. And it's always, you see like-minded people who recommend books to you. And it's, like I said, it's in institutions where I really got empowered by them sort of books. It's not in our hands, is it really? I mean, I would love to see these things in schools. I think they need to be in schools. the diverse community we got now, especially in London, it demands being in schools, especially in London. So I don't know whether lobbying the schools will help, but I think yes, it should be.
We just we were just going to go over. I know we're going to speak to Trey after, but I just want to hear from a female's perspective, because we see it's quite male dominated, and it's always good to hear from the sisters, because obviously, you know, we're behind it as well. So I'm going to direct this to Camilla. Camilla, are you there? Camilla? All right. So how do you feel about, you also work in the early years. How do you feel about the fact of it not being in our curriculum, coming from yourself?
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's essential that Black history is within the curriculum. I think it needs to start within early years, but it needs to follow throughout compulsory education. I feel, as a white woman, I feel it's important for both Black and white people. I feel, like I mentioned earlier, the works of Frances Cress Welsing has had a big influence on me when in her ISIS papers, when she talks about the inferiority. I feel that the colonialism, the racist education is taught to both white and Black people, and to break that system down, we need to teach both white and Black people the true history of Black people, and that it's not people have made towards the world as a whole. Historically, is, for me, it's important on all levels.
Yeah, that's. I mean, for me, Trey, I'll come to you in a minute, but I'll just interject myself for the moment and just give a kind of synopsis of where I've come from, which is what I stated in the beginning. And I think for me, it's been very difficult. I mean, I was fortunate in one sense that I grew up in Blagrove, and again, I grew up around back. Well, I was a youngster, I was 3, and I think Backyard had more or less merged into PPIC at that point. Backyard again was what Gus will remember, as in a kind of a community environment where you would come in and you would. I mean, they made their own leaflets and newspapers. They advised the community. It was an advisory centre in the beginning. Again, it had some of the Black Panther influence and initiatives in there, and how you structure yourself, how you collaborate with other local areas, and even outside of London. They were very good when the Mangrove trial was, what's the word I'm looking for? When the Mangrove trial was on. Whether it be the first magistrate's trial or the second trial. But either way, we had those community hubs. We don't have those community hubs anymore, unfortunately. And the thing is, one of the things that my dad was very, very, very passionate about was to be self-reliant, financially, as well as educationally, as well as, intellectually. And the fact that we had to be reliant on a system that you knew was designed to break you, is quite. It's a very emotionally kind of charged, negative thing that we have to keep battling every day. And when you see when you've had your own personal experience where you've got your children, when you've gone through school, you face racism from the teachers because the teachers themselves are not adequate in their knowledge. On top of that, they don't realize they're not adequate. And they're putting their own inadequacies and their own judgments and assumptions on the child. Then they have favoritism. Then they have the Black young boy is very, very cute and very lovely until the age of 11. And then the killing field starts with him. Character assassination, you reduce the confidence, they don't know how to deal with Black energy generally. And what you find now going through, and what I have seen, so not only have I gone through it as the next generation of my parent, born here, gone through the system here, I've noticed then for my son to go through, all my children, but my son in particular, to go through the same thing at 11. Up until from primary school, he was wonderful, he was beautiful, he was intelligent, he's this, he's that. Teachers would pour all these kind of accolades on my son. As soon as he got into year 7, I think year 7 is a first and last year, or even up to year 8, where boys are taught to some extent equally, if you want to say equally, and that's a very broad term, and I say equally. But as you get into end of year 8 and year 9, you become a threat, because these boys are growing up and they're becoming and looking like men. This is when the problem starts.
Yeah,
for me.
Start to get the tone.
And I hear, and the time then for these young black boys is that you can see. And the thing that I have to also emphasize that with Jen, when she comes in, parents are the key. And my dad always used to emphasize this. If you do not believe your child, when they come home and start telling you that they're being systematically picked on by the teacher and by the surrounding teachers and the judgments that the head teacher and everybody else has about you or that child, and you go in there and you're not listening, you're hearing but you're not listening, what happens then is that every time you go to a parents' evening, every time you go into those institutions with your child, the teachers are very smart with parents' evening, because they don't sit down there and tell you how positive your child is doing naturally. There's always an edge to it, and there's always something that comes around that says, however, your son is A, B, C, D, and by the time you finish, if you're not a strong parent, what I learned to do is I hear what they're saying, but I don't battle with them at the table at parents' evening. What I did was I went home, I got the information from the teachers, and I discussed what we heard between myself, my child, and I also used to bring the other parent, which is his dad, because I think it's very important as well that whether you emotionally are attached to your the other parent, in other words, whether you're in a relationship with them or not, you must go down to these schools unified. Wherever you go as a family, be unified, because if you don't, the child will pick up on that young person will pick up on that, and what they do is they feel that you're not supportive, and the communication starts breaking down. Once the communication starts breaking down, then outside influences on your child will then start happening.
But do you also feel, Camilla, that because there was also this thing as growing up, I remember my brothers and things as we grew up, and they were told, when the teacher, they would get in trouble from the teacher, they was always like, but how come you're telling off me and you're not telling off my pair? The white pair, and then they would always be told, oh, just keep your head down and get through school. And so they always felt that they had to just keep their head down, accept the way the system was, just so they can finish.
How they've been treated.
But following to that, I just want to say also, coming of mixed coaches, obviously being mixed race, I that word, but I always remember that I was fortunate enough as a child. It was funny because when I was young growing up, my mum was white, but she recognised the system, as a white woman also. In that, I remember when I grew up, she told the first thing she used to tell us as children is, learn about your black side. We live in a white system. You're going to learn everything you need to know about the white side of things. The education. Learn about the black side. Learn about your culture. I mean, she learned it all anyway, because obviously she teaching went into Africa and she was teaching and stuff. But I always remember as a child, my mum enforcing it in my head that you don't need to learn anything about white society because you're living in it. You're going to learn it anyway. Learn about the black side. So in some ways, I think we were very fortunate because we had that mindset to be told that. And that mindset made me challenge things a lot as well going through school, because I always knew that I kind of had this, not a defense, but it was like, I always remember my own mother telling me as a white woman, even though she's Irish and she probably got just as bad things coming to the UK. But if your own mother's telling you that as a white woman, then it just made me, very defensive when I went to school. So I was already seeing it before it was even happening, because I had that inkling from a child that I'm going to be different. I'm going to be different, so I need to make sure I learn for myself. I never relied on the system and the curriculum, because I knew that from being told that by my own mother, who was the same colour as these people that were going to be teaching me, how would I learn anything from them if my own mother's telling me that I need to learn myself? So I found going through life, I did learn myself, and anything I needed to know, I knew that it's like doing your homework. When you go to school, you learn, and you go home and do your homework. So for me, going to school was just to learn whatever they want to teach me because I'm in the system, and then you go home and you do your homework and you teach yourself. Yeah. My children, they learn themselves. They actually teach themselves. I would even say my daughter got through school and she's done very well A levels, but she taught her she taught herself. She didn't rely on the system, and you can't rely on the system to get through.
And can I ask Trey then how he feels about the system?
Personally, I feel like the system is against us in the sense of we don't get enough education put in our system. We get told the basics of white education, and we get how it's more important in a sense. Like when you're growing up in secondary school, we don't really learn the history of Black history. We get that quick, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, then we stop there. And then it goes into, white privilege of Hitler, World War I, World War II. And we don't get we have to go out our own way, go grab some books and learn about it our own way. And that's why I'm fortunate and thankful for my parents that, they taught me and that they educated me on Black privilege and how I'm a Black king. I should learn about my Black rights, about my Black history. But then when it comes to actually education-wise, you're told, you're going to be a certain way. And I just think it is very wrong how Black people are told they're not going to reach that higher standard. They're not going to reach the level that a white person can be at. They're only going to reach that limit, and we're still going to be under that white control. We're still not going to be able to hop over that bridge. And like being in college and going through education wise, and my teacher telling me, you will be this way, but someone else who's white and who looks more successful to you, they're gonna grow more successful because of they're not trying to say it, but it is true. The color of my skin is affecting the way I'm gonna come up in the world, and it's just a fact of trying to prove you wrong. It's not even a thing of trying to prove you wrong. I'm trying to show you and make you understand that Black people can reach a higher level than a white person. It's not about the color of my skin. It's about the skills that we have and our history. And so we have so many more stories to tell, and we never get a chance to sit and tell them. And being in university now, I still go through the same thing. It's not a thing where the story changed. I'll still being told the same thing. And I went through a similar issue of racism where my teacher told me, a girl said the N-word in the class, and instead of the teacher breaking out and breaking loose, he just was very calm about it, to a point where me, myself, and a few other Black people in my class, because we were the only Black people there, we had to then make a union, and we made a union to go against the teacher and how Black language wasn't recognized, how someone can say something so offensive and it not taking out precaution. But if I said something to a white person, I would have been might even go to jail. They were called police, whatever. I'm looked at a certain way. I give a certain look of anger. They think I'm gonna stab someone. And it's just like being fought like that. It hurts, but at the same time, as a Black person, we have to find a way to maneuver around that system. We have to, as a Black person, we have to sneak our way and find the loopholes, and that's kind of what I have a feel about that. I think for white people, it's easier. They have a straight path. They have that, you get your education, you get this. For a Black person, we have to make loops, we have to make connections, we have to get educated in a different sense. Yeah, exactly. And it just hurts, but at the same time, it's very understandable. And I feel like Black people are more strong enough to handle that.
So Gus, you want to say something there? Sorry, Ferd.
Yes, I just want to make a couple of points to link some of what was said. It occurs to me that the major function that these series of films that Steve McQueen is doing, with the involvement of people like George and others, Brian and others, is that it demonstrates the extent to which that huge slice of British social history that we have created and are responsible for is totally airbrushed out of the whole system, especially not just schools. The same is true of universities, and I think Brother Cecil would endorse that. Very few young people today know anything about the New Cross massacre in 1981. the major event, which isn't understood enough in terms of resistance, that happened at the Notting Hill Carnival in 1976.
Yeah.
The fact that before the Mangrove, there was at least 20 years of nigger hunting going on in West London, the Blagrove area and so on. My father, who lived in Acton, came here in 1957. By the end of 1972, he was back in Grenada, pledging never to set foot in England again, because he was nearly killed on his way home from work one morning by some skinheads, nigger hunting. All right. So okay, I mean, and that's before Mangrove, before the New Cross Day of Action in 1981 and everything else. So if you have conversations, as I have been having, and I'm sure many of us have been having this last week with the young people, gauging their reaction to the Mangrove 9 film, it is utterly amazing how little they know about the presence of Black people in London, never mind the country, at that time. Now, why is that important? I am saying that we have to be, and other colleagues have said it before, we've got to be in control of preserving that history. And not just preserving it for ourselves, but making sure that every school and every university knows Black people.
That's right.
And for us, therefore, there is a major responsibility. Geoff asked the question about the curriculum, and it's not just the novels of Courttia, Newland and Alex Wheatle and such folk, which has so much to say about the country, in the same way that Linton Kwesi Johnson and Benjamin Zephaniah's poems do. But it's really about how we understand that the more we get, the more we are numerically in this society, the more seemingly integrated into its institutions and systems we become, is the weaker we become.
Yeah.
Is the weaker we become. So that Brother Cecil would remember those pioneering meetings we had at the West Indian Student Center in Earl's Court in the late 1960s, the Community Education and Community Workers Association. If we had recorded every single one of those events, and there was a time when we met every fortnight on a Sunday, we met in that place. And John LaRose would come with his supermarket carrier bags full of books. Jessica and Eric would come with the books. The tables would be at the back as you came into the hall, and we would be swarming to find that literature. We had people like Trevor MacDonald, Louis Marriott, Clyde Lane, Canute James, Obi Egbuna at Bush House, working for the BBC, Africa Service, Caribbean Service, and so on. Children were able to go into New Beacon Books, go into Bogle Louverture, and sit with famous international authors like Andrew Salke, like Walter Rodney when he passed through, and those people, and get a sense of what they were bringing to the writing, the sense they were making of the world through their scholarship and the books and so on and so forth. The problem is that we as parents didn't make ourselves responsible for carrying on that tradition.
Yeah.
We had the International Book Fair running from 1982 till 1995. And every year, hordes of people, hundreds of people would pass through the book fair and buy the books and so on and so forth. Those two bookshops didn't go away. They are still there. Okay, Uncle Eric, Elder Eric runs a book service now rather than a bookshop. But New Beacon is still there.
Yeah.
But we have not been encouraging our own children to find and buy and read those books. We have not been encouraging them to write about their own experiences through the prism of their experience of schooling and of the society. And there's a massive gap, therefore, emerging in terms of what was, what is now, and God forbid, what is bloody well to come.
And can I just say also as well that just coming through the university side of things, again, you know, we found that we had to challenge even the lecturers, and then became enemy number one because we were challenging the theorists that they were putting in front of us. There's no black theorists at all, or intellectuals that they would even look at to state a question that they would wanting to ask from us. So we made that quite apparent. And you know, I mean, what was interesting for me is even culturally, some of my brothers and sisters that I was with, whether it be Chinese, whether it be English, whether it be my brothers that are in Africa and sisters that are in Africa, they would get kind of frustrated because they didn't understand the depth and the magnitude of what I'm actually trying to enlighten them on. So they used to get frustrated. Oh, this is not the platform for this. This is not the platform to talk about this. You know, and they would believe everything that is there. And it was so one-sided, the education. And I couldn't believe after 20 years of my first set of education of accounting and management accounts and everything else, going back into the institution, and still nothing has really changed. It's still all white in terms of not necessarily who's teaching you, but the information that they're using to advance us is still predominantly very white. So with that, bearing that in mind, Cecil, what do you think about that?
Can I just say, sorry, Cecil.
I don't necessarily.
Sorry, Cecil.
I don't necessarily respect. Am I being heard?
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to.
I don't, with respect, necessarily want to respond to that, because as Gus said, we actually do need to organize what has happened and try to organize something out of what we're actually doing.
Okay.
And enough of what has happened points to how much we've done in the past. People heard about from Guts about, for example, the International Book Fair. There's much more. And Shepherd's Bush Library. You know what that represented? It was one example. All of the boroughs in London once had, I think they used to call them ethnic minority librarians. And all of those assembled gigantic collections of black stuff. Go to any library now, any central library, and ask where those collections are. They've actually gone, right? In addition to that, we're welcoming these films that are presently being made, but we got a whole heritage of film stuff that's not being used by anybody, and that's almost been forgotten. And so how can we take this forward? It's very important that we acknowledge that the national curriculum matters, right? This is where we live. This is our children, we can homeschool and we can do the Saturday schools. And we've done that very well, all of that very well. But our children are in those schools. So how are we as a community organizing to impact the national curriculum? And our community fails horribly in terms of organizing around those matters. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Windrush, the people, the victims, are now complaining. We knew when the compensation scheme was being put together that it was horrible, but the community couldn't come together to do anything about it. So they got a black guy to go up there and set up this foolish and wicked scheme. And now we have to prepare to fight against it. So organizing on the education front has to focus back inside of the community, and we're doing a whole heap. We can do that better, but we have to have some kind of framework for representing ourselves in relation to change.
That's right.
With and in a thing like the national curriculum, it matters. We can't just say that we shouldn't be here or that we're not going to be here. Yeah. We are here for the duration, and what happens in the national curriculum matters. And the extent to which they're not interested in change poses us a challenge which we really have to organize to face up to, and we're not actually organized in that way. So I think forums like this need to lead to stronger, not just to change, but putting the mechanism for ensuring that we can, mobilize to make the changes, both within ourselves, building back on a lot of the stuff that we've done. People talk about books. There's a brother from Guyana called Edward Scobie who wrote a book about Black people's presence in Britain that has all of the stuff that the current generation of Black historians are rediscovering or elaborating. No, everybody has forgotten Scobie's book, and they think that the white guys' staying power was the first account. It wasn't. So to repeat and end, we have to organize better as our community around the issues that face us in this racist place. And Gus's point about us owning what we're doing and strengthening ourselves to take forward that heritage is important, but also being able to confront the system right? There's a book written by an African-American guy who passed through here and looked at the British education system. You know what he entitled his book? Doing Good by Doing Little. Mm-hmm. And it could have been entitled Doing Good by Doing Nothing. Right? The British are very good at managing things in their interest and to the detriment of their victims. And we're not up to facing up to them and dealing with it.
Not yet.
On that note, Cecil, because I think that's a brilliant, because we've way gone over time. Well, we were over time now, but that was a brilliant ending, I must say. I think, Jamila, we're going to have to wrap this up because we've gone over the 2 hours. I would love to stay on and just continue this conversation. It'd be maybe nice to get back together and do another episode of this.
Can I just ask? I should know this, but I don't. And Jamila may have told me 20 times and I've forgotten. What is the future of this group? Or how are the podcasts going to work? What is this going to be a regular kind of forum with different participants or what?
Yes. So we've done about 2 episodes so far. So we call it the next generation of the Mangrove 9. So it's kind of after our parents and tribute to the Mangrove 9. And what it is, it's a platform where we would do a radio show that it goes out on, a podcast, but it also goes out visual. So we do a video just like this with all you guys in it. And that goes out on our YouTube channel. And then we've got a website that we want to build archive in. So we want to be able to put up all these educational talks and some of the podcasts onto our website. So that people can access what you're talking about. So if you talk about and discuss books that you think are relevant for the younger generation that they should be listening to, if you've got some information that you feel that can contribute to the younger generation, this is what this is all about, coming together and being able to educate the youth ourselves, in finding information, in finding archives, in finding books like what Cecil was talking about, or Courttia, we all know about that.
And documentaries.
Yeah. So this is what we're trying to achieve, me and Camilla. Part of we've got 2 sisters that are also involved in it. That's our aim, to get the information out there and archived for the younger generation. And having you guys, I'm going to let you talk in a minute, Camilla, on our platform. Who can tell the story better? Who are the better historians than yourselves to be able to educate the younger generation? So it's brilliant. I'm just blown away by the show and listening to you, to everyone talking about their stories and what you've contributed to the show. It's just amazing.
Can I just say, I know we're going to wrap up shortly, but I think it would be nice to let Brian, I know you haven't said, because you've got your own you're a journalist, you've got your own show that you're looking at and that you're not looking at, but that you currently are operating. So I think it would be nice to end with a couple of with Trey, and if you want to ask anything to the
younger generation, so questions and answers
to the filmmakers.
Short, because we've gone over, and Camilla will say that, and then when we edit it, we'll have to.
That's fine. But yeah, but I think it's important. I mean, time is relevant in one sense, but I think it's also important that the three of them, the younger generations, get a platform that they could either speak to Leo or Jen.
So we can have open questions,
or George. Or Courttia. I think it's very important they just have that little platform, even if it's for 10 minutes. We will get around to how we edit and all the rest of it. But I think that's important.
Right, the floor is yours, Brian, Trey, and Matulu. So who wants to go first, Brian?
Yeah, I was gonna say, hearing everyone talk. So one of the themes that came up was about self-reliance that we spoke about, and I think we've already established that the education system is flawed. So I think now the responsibility is on us, our generation, and the people who are still in education now to go and find that information for themselves. So, for example, when I started my dissertation on the Mangrove 9 trial, there was very limited information out there, which is why I had to go and conduct the oral history interviews. But I wasn't getting that education from school. I'd only learnt about it when I chose it as my dissertation. So I think there's also a responsibility on us to go and find our history without waiting to be taught, because otherwise we'll be wasting a long time. And I think the other issue is about accessibility of information. I think if our elders and people who have been campaigning years before us can make this information accessible to us and be open with their information, that will go a long way in helping us actually cover it and understand it. Because, for example, some of the books that I accessed for my dissertation, you had Obi Egbuna's Destroy This Temple book. Now there was only 3 copies at universities: Cambridge, the British Library, and I think there was one in the north. I forget the name of the university. I had to pay £50 to get that book, and that's money that I had to struggle to get so that I could buy that book. That kind of shows the inaccessibility of this history, and I think it's up to our community to use forums like this to make sure that it's known, to be open with information and make it easily accessible.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that, Brian. So Matulu or
Trey,
would you like to direct a question to anyone on the panel, or would you like to say something?
No, there's just a lot of things which really sparked a lot of dialogue within my head. And just from my experience, I feel like it's insanity to ask our oppressors to allow us in and let us give our part. Do you get what I'm saying? Because I just find it's very conflicting. I don't see why we can't create our own institutions, because our history is so significant and so extensive. It would completely override the entire curriculum itself. It can't just be in history, which is their history, not our history. Like, it would take over everything. It would be more than 6 hours of school to teach the Black history. Do you get what I'm saying? So I think it's irrational to even ask them, because I can see why they don't want to involve our history, because it's too much. Do you get what I'm saying? So we need to teach our own in our own places. Like Auntie Jamila was saying, we used to have community hubs back in the day, non-existent today. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's causing, for me anyways, like, I don't know where to go. I can't link up with people who think like-minded like me and talk about important political issues within our race. We can mobilize together and actually make something happen. It's non-existent, and that's something else that we need to tackle. And even the least the mainstream curriculum could do is employ Black teachers, so that I can identify with this person trying to teach me. Do you get what I'm saying? I went to all boys school, very diverse. We were actually predominantly Black, but the teachers teaching us was Miss Becky from Scotland. She's teaching us history. Do you think a class of 30 Black boys is going to listen to you? Like, there's already going to be some serious cultural tension there. You know what I'm saying? So we need actual elders to come in from the community who can actually teach us. So then we're actually going to look at you and look at you as an uncle, as an auntie, as a father. You get me? And there's already going to be that mutual respect. That's the least they could do. Employ people that look like the majority of the school pupils within the school. Do you get what I'm saying? But they're not even doing that. So I think it's asinine to ask them for, to let us in. Do you get me? We should really focus on our own. But yeah.
So Trey, do you feel like what Matulu was saying about the fact that we need more representation of people that are alike that we can relate to?
Yeah,
be able to teach us, and educate us on things. I mean, how, like he said, how will they really educate us about ourselves when they don't know?
Yeah, I agree definitely, because I feel like when we're speaking with someone of our ancestors or someone of our color, they know, they've been exactly what we've been through. Everyone has a unique story, but they've been through like majority of what we've been through, so we can understand it on a level where a white teacher could explain to me, this is the history of Mangrove 9, but I wouldn't understand it like how a black person would explain it. They would explain it, this is how you're going to be treated. When my mum was raising me in school, she told me that before you go to school, this is how you're going to be treated. This is how you need to look at this. This is how you might be raised, This is how they're going to look at you a certain way. And that caution made me who I am today, in the sense of how smart I am when it comes to talking to a certain person. I don't get myself in trouble with police because I know how to handle them. And I feel like that level of education is what we need for a black child. And hearing that from a black person or hierarchy, then you're looking at them and you're like, I see you. I see what you've been through. You know exactly what I'm going through on a level where a white teacher couldn't. And that's how I feel like, as even trying to be a black director, you're looked at a certain way where you're like, only certain movies that you can make, when really and truly as a black director you can make a variety of things, right? A variety. But as a black person, they go, you can only make a little short about a black person. It's got to be about a black person. No, it can be about anything I want to make it about, or you're related, you only get that one relation, what, like Spike Lee? Or, there's not much black directors out, Spike Lee. But then you're mentioning Quentin Tarantino, who done Django Unchained. But really and truly, it wasn't really a black person doing it. And I see what Cecil was talking about when he was talking about we need to take claim for that. Because at the end of the day, if a black director went into that and they fully went into the story, I feel like it could have been in deeper depth and it could have been explained a lot more better than Quentin Tarantino did, And I think through that, even though he done it well, I think black people, we should take acknowledge for our stuff. We should take our stuff and be like, no, this is ours. We're gonna explain our story this way. It's our story, So that's what I have to say on that.
I can see Brother Leah, thank you, Trey. I can see Brother Leah smiling, and as you smile, what it reminds me of? The real McCoy.
Yeah.
We so missed the real McCoy. It was so ahead of its time, feeling respect for yourself and others. I've forgotten all the names of the others, but it was so prevalent at that time. And the fact that, it has been hidden and buried in the archive for how many years now, since the 90s, is a disgrace in itself. But there's education in the humor and what you identified with, even culturally within all of us, and how our interrelationships, between man and woman, children, everything that we thought was, that we used to laugh about internally in the community, you brought it to the public.
Don't laugh, you cry. That's our favorite word.
And how do you feel about even how they've treated you and Real McCoy?
Well, they buried the Real McCoy for 25 years and they lied and told the public that the footage had been lost and all manner of different excuses. But again, that's the reality of trying to work within a system that's never designed for you. And if we make our progress within that system, whatever makes you ultimately can break you, which is why, again, I'm very encouraged. I must be honest with you. When I hear young people like Matulu, believe me, I know that the future is bright because they have an understanding of the reality of the time and what must be done. And so, we can continue if we want to press in and beating our heads against this immovable wall to try to get the system to accommodate us. But I say again, it never, ever will happen. Black people, it's not the system that's going to change, it's we who have to change. Recognizing the reality of who we are, recognizing the reality of who we were, and who we must return to be, because we have been fashioned and shaped by an enemy of ourselves and made into a caricature of ourselves, and we now think that that which has been made by them is who we are. That's not who we are. We are a very beautiful, very powerful, very productive people. I remember, actually, just as a little aside, reading in the newspaper one day, somebody was criticizing me, saying, "Oh, I'm confused by that Leo Muhamed, because 1 minute he's a comedian, the next minute he's an activist, the next minute," and I reflected on that, and I said to myself, look at this foolishness. Nobody gets confused when Arnold Schwarzenegger is kindergarten cop, then he is the governor of California, and he's able to do all of these multiplicity of things. But black people, somehow we're reduced to some type of stereotypical rule that we can only do this or we can only do that. I agree with my young brother,
a sports player,
who said, we can do anything we want to do. Matula said it as well. And as soon as we come to the realization that we, Moses didn't come to integrate the children of Israel into Pharaoh. He came and said, "Let my people go." We have to go. And I'm not talking about some mythical, all of a sudden physically we all get up and go back to Africa or whatever. Some of us will do that. But what I'm saying is that we have to leave the mindset of white supremacy, because many of us, even though we have this black skin, we are white supremacists in that we don't believe that we can actually exist without the paradigm that white people have put us into. And we have to come out of that mindset and become self-confident again and develop some self-interest. We are the only people on the planet who have no self-interest. Individually, we may have self-interest, but not collective self-interest. We need to get back. People are talking about the black community. It does not exist. We have to make a black community. It doesn't exist. It's a myth, this black community, because if there was one, we would control the economics within it, we would control the politics within it, we would have power within it. But black people have been completely and utterly disempowered. And I'm appealing to all of us, brothers and sisters, we need to think again about this process of unity, because we talk unity, but we've never actually tried it. And we actually have to come together as a people and actually start to love one another, love self, work together and recognize that we can do anything that we want to do. And the powers that be, they know it. And that's why they keep throwing out these little carrots and these little trinkets for us to keep us asleep. Now black people are all excited because, oh, Trump is going to be out of power. And here comes Biden and Harris. And we got hope again. Really? Watch and see what's coming down the pipe. And so I'm just saying, brothers and sisters, I may sound, like some negative person. Believe me, I'm not. I have a young children. I have older children, but I've got a young son who is 11 years old. And believe me, the future is extremely bright for black people. But there has to be a mind shift from this dependency into an independent mentality. And those of us who are working within the system, we can do stuff in there. There's nothing wrong with that. But there has to be a different attitude when it comes to this idea of independence, because integration actually represents disintegration for us. And this is our problem. We've bought into this idea of integration, and what it's done is disintegrated us. We must reintegrate among ourselves. We must have a different attitude. That's my contribution. And I really want to thank you, to the organizers of this, because it's a very beautiful forum. And I hope you continue, and whatever I can do going forward to assist you in whatever way, please, feel free to call on me. But always remember with me, I'm always going to come straight, and I'm just going to tell you the truth.
Well, on the show, we thank you, Leo Muhamed, and as me and Jamila have always said, even down to some of the shows where we're just having joke and interrupting in each other, we keep it real. So we're not going to try and chop it up and make it sound all professional. You're going to hear noise in the background and whatever, but we're keeping it real. We're not trying to be a big company. We're just trying to keep it real. And if there's a way to, and it shows you by doing the way we've come together and doing this, it is possible. No one has to wait to say we have to have big funding or we need a big company behind us to be able to get the message out. That's a load of rubbish. Little Zoom meeting, and we're all in it together. And this is going to go. We'll be able to be broadcasted out. It will be down to us, as you said, us being united and together to share this information and to try and push it amongst ourselves. That's down to us as ourselves. If you share something on social media and your friend shares it and it keeps sharing, you don't need a big company to back you up to do that. It's all about uniting and doing it with yourselves to get it out there for everybody to see. If we don't choose to do that, because that happens a lot in our, when you say not a community, but it happens a lot within in the Black community, is that we don't share, we don't support each other and push things out there. Because you can see these youngsters making these trap videos of music and they put it on the social media and it goes boom, a million hits and things out there. It's a million people being brainwashed in particular ways. So you don't need big money to be able to put things together. And we're very creative people. We know how to do it ourselves. So just getting on a Zoom and being able to have a bit of IT skills, we're able to do these things. Sitting down, everybody who's got all the education for years and years and years that we've all gone through with Professor Gus and Cecil and everybody else who's on the show, and Leo Muhamed, we're able to express and share the information. So I just want to say thank you for everybody who's come on here, because just by you actually giving that information and coming on the show, you've made a big contribution to what people don't know out there in a way that we can share it. And Camilla,
real quick, could I just say something real quick, going off something that elder brother Leo Muhamed said about unity, and I just feel like the parents, and this has been spoken about, the parents have an extreme responsibility of etching that into the kids from young. Do you get what I'm saying? Because mind you, we all Black people here, from my experience, we understand that we're a minority and racism exists, and we've all experienced it to some degree. But what's now conflicting about that is the fact that there's no unity with it. Because this guy who understands that racism's there, and he got called a nigger last week. He's gonna go shank the next brother next week. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, and it doesn't make sense. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you understand that there is a common enemy, and the raw ops are the oppressors, not your next brother, then you get what I'm saying? We shouldn't even be dealing with fighting one another. And when this unity element has been taught and etched within our brains from young, I definitely feel like the mainstream school system, how we approach that will be a lot different, because there will be a ulterior understanding of the students there that although I'm being taught this, I understand that there's more to it, and I'm just going to use the tools and the education that you're giving me to contribute back to my community. You get what I'm saying?
And this is what I'm encouraging young people to do. And I also say to young people, look, you've got to look at trading. There's another thing that irritates me, and I'll just be very quick on this. Well, like I said, my degree is to do with oil and gas and energy and renewable energies and recycling. This is something that, plastic is in everything that we do and eat. We've been eating our own plastic. That's how bad it's got. Cancers are up. Everything is up. Why are we not teaching ourselves to trade? I remember a trader said to me once when I was working in the city, he said to me, they delight in the fact that they have a recession. And I couldn't understand that for the life of me. How could you delight with, the negativity that comes with recession? And he just broke it down very quickly. He just said to me, well, look, when the recession happens, companies are losing their commodities, their market value. We buy into that because it's obviously gone down, and then when the market starts to bounce back, we make a lot of money by selling. So I then thought about that, and I said to my dad years ago, I said, Dad, because he was always saying about training, having a training school for the young people in unity, and I will say just slightly different to Leo. We had unity to some extent, but what was unifying maybe 50 years ago is that our parents came from the Caribbean and had unity within the islands, and then they had unity collectively with all the islands to some extent. We still have politics in the island because we have different colonial countries that rule those countries, those Caribbean islands, sorry, not countries, Caribbean islands. So we've always had the kind of fractions of you're big island, if you're Jamaican, you're small island, if you're small island, you have to mind them Jamaicans. And so we've always had certain things, or you're Bayesian, you're too English, or you're this, so we've always had the indirect difficulties within the islands. But when it comes to a common denominator, which was racism, our parents united in the 60s, 50s, and 70s and 80s. So to some extent, but obviously when Maggie came in and then said, well, actually, we want you to, young people, you're only going to elevate yourself or get certain places or even get property if you're single or you're pregnant, single female pregnant.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, divide and conquer. So we had all these different issues that divided us. If you're on income support, then you can't say that you're with your partner because then you get less money. All these complexities that they put in to divide the family, all families, but especially the Black family. So these are the things we've got to look at. And going back to Jennifer and Camilla, Jennifer, you're very right in saying that it goes down to parents, and you spoke, you advised that very eloquently, and hence I'm kind of repeating some of the element. The same with Gus, bringing teachers over who look like you, who are higher educated than the actual, teachers that are here, which is astonishing. Even down to David Lammy saying, confronting Cambridge and Oxford universities. Where are the Black students? All of a sudden they've scrambled all together. And our intake is now, our enrollment is now increased with Black students. I don't need to beg Cambridge. I don't need to beg. I mean, if you get there and you're enrolled in there, fine. But also know that, do you fit into that environment? You've got to struggle. I mean, George had a boarding school education. A lot of my family have had boarding school education, and it's hit and miss in private schools because you can see the ideology of racism in the private and boarding school sections anyway, because it's all about me, I. And I've actually worked alongside people who have been educated privately, and unless they have traveled, unless they are more open, they are very difficult people to deal with in terms of sharing information or being a part of something. They've all been trained to look at a certain, and obviously trained in terms of their parents having connections within themselves in the city. So they will always look after their own. So, white privilege is very prevalent in private and boarding school education. And when they come out into the community world, or they come out into a diverse situation that they've never been a part of, and especially if they're teachers, it is a killing field the way they deal with our children. So, without going on any further, Jennifer, I just want to bring you back in, and Camilla to have the last few words, and then we'll have to obviously definitely call it.
Yes. Some people are in the chat now. Some people need to go and need to leave. So can we please keep this quite short, if you do?
Thank you. There's been a number of things that I wanted to. I had my hand up, was waving. I wanted to.
Sorry.
It's fine. One of those was I was very fortunate enough to have been. Well, there's three things. I was very fortunate enough to have. I had two very good teachers, both my English teachers, the second of which at secondary school brought in an Afro-Caribbean literature onto the curriculum. It was the first and only time I know of it happening, certainly in that school. I really benefited from that because I'm ashamed to say until that time I didn't know that Black people wrote, and was extremely blessed, and then became really an avid reader of anything from the African and Caribbean, which meant predominantly American, I have to say. But I'm glad I was introduced to that. And the other thing is just to reiterate what other people have said about the community. I think yes, it is. I think there is an over-reliance sometimes on what happens in schools and what happens in formal environments, as opposed to what happens to home, as opposed to home learning and cultural learning and cultural capital that we have and that we should be investing in our own children and reinforcing those ideas at home. And I know that there's a lot of competition out there. I mean, I've got a 27-year-old daughter. I can't say that I've had as much success as I'd like. I hope that comes. I hope I start to see that. But I think we mustn't over-rely on what is going on outside. And remember that Gus has got some, I can't remember exactly what it is, that Gus has got at the end of his, as his footer in his email. Do read it, something about, I'll mess it up if I try and say it.
Gus, right, fear no one.
No, there was something else about education and everything you learnt at school. Something about forgetting everything you learnt at school. sorry, as I said, I don't want to say, I'll mess it up. Request an email from Gus and you'll see. So I think, yeah, our own cultural identity as exists within our homes, what we give children access to. And the other thing I wanted to say, people talking about George Padmore Institute, all that stuff, all that great stuff that was happening. But for me, in the 90s in particular, 80s, maybe late 80s, probably early 90s, there was a group called, run by Tony Fairweather, called The Right Thing, Right, W-R-I-T-E. And they would bring over authors from the States. I met Toni Morrison, I met Alice Walker. It was amazing. It didn't go for very long, but I think things like that we, they were always, those events were always full, and I just think those kind of things, those are the kind of things that I'm missing. And we need to be, I mean, forums like this, we need to be investing more in doing those sorts of things and not waiting for somebody else to do it, or why don't they have this for us? We need to create those things for ourselves.
Sustainability, self-sustainability, yes.
Camilla?
Hello, yeah. So I just wanted to say, I wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier about young black boys sort of being cute until the age of year 7. I've had a different experience with my own sons, and I think that actually, and at working as an early years educator, I think that actually black boys, we have to really fight hard for black boys within the education system. I found that my son was at risk of being excluded from a young age at school, and I fought against it. To their horror, I won the appeal, so I was glad about that. But I definitely think, and this is just from my experience, about I feel it's because of all the negative stereotypes about young black men, and I think that kind of like, although I can hear what you're saying about it coming in when you're at year 7, I think it's dripped in gradually throughout the
No, I totally agree.
And I think we really need to fight against that, because it goes into the criminal justice system, and the for example, joint enterprise law. It's the amount of young black men that are serving life sentences for crimes that they haven't committed under joint enterprise is just it's terrible. It's disgusting. And as obviously, as it's been said throughout everybody, it is to do with systemic racism. And obviously, we all agree that we need to fight against it.
Thank you very much for that, Camilla.
And Courttia just said something. Courttia just put a message in. Sorry, Links. Courttia has just given us a message.
About Stratford. Wait 1 minute, I'll read that out, and then I'm going to be the bearer of bad news, because Camilla will just leave us for like 5 hours, and then we'll get in trouble with trying to edit it. So I'm going to be the bearer of the horrible one who's got to end the show. I'll take it on the chin, all right? But doesn't mean to say we can't do another episode of this, because it was brilliant, and I think it was amazing. So I'm just going to see what Courttia says. So Courttia says, the New Black Film Collective is one of those community forums based in Stratford, so that's one to look out for. And Leo Muhamed said, thank you very much to everyone. I'm extremely honoured to have been on the panel. Thank you, Leo Muhamed, for being on the panel. We are extremely privileged to have you here. Oops, I nearly cut us all off. I just want to say thank you. So Jamila, thank you. So I'm going to say thank you to Cecil Gutsmore for being on our show. I want to say thank you to Courttia Newland. Make sure everyone checks out his film tomorrow, The Lovers Rock. And what's the other film, Courttia?
Red, White and Blue.
Red, White and Blue, that's going to be on when?
And may I just say that, unlike Professor Gus, I'm not a professor. I saw you.
You don't have to have a title to be a professor. You're a professor. You're a professor. You're a professor. You don't need a title.
We don't do. We do our own titles. We do our own titles.
Sir, you are a professor. And then, so thank you, Courttia.
Thank you.
So I think the date, time, what's the date? Sorry,
I think the Red, White and Blue is on the 29th.
Beard alone.
29th.
Oh, sorry, Leo's talking.
Just on the basis, I'm just saying, just on the basis of the beard alone.
Yeah, you get the title. You're the right. And so a very thank you to George.
I know you want to finish. Can I just say this?
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure to have met Brian and Mutulu and Trey.
Yeah. Lovely to have you guys.
As someone who has got considerably more past than future to look forward to.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to know we've got some young
with tremendous hope
people out there.
That these young people are expressing the consciousness that they've shared with us.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to say a big thank you to you, Professor Gus John, and obviously you knew my uncle and auntie very well, and you brought them over. They speak highly of you.
Thank you.
Always speaking of you, and they told me they're reaching out to you anyway, so I'm going to have to pass your details because you lost touch somewhere.
Sure.
I'd like to say a big thank you to Jennifer Lewis. Thank you, sister, for your contribution. I want to say a big thank you to Camilla Kenny. Thank you for your contribution, my long-term friend as well. Too long. A big thank you to Leo Muhamed for your contribution always, and I'd like to see the funny side of you again. I'm like, no, McCoy, you have to get you to tell a few jokes next time. I'm going to say a big thank you to Brian Knight. You guys, man, that's all I can say. You give us hope.
I'm also so honored. So no, sorry, go on. I don't mean to cut you. Go on.
Sorry. A big thank you to Matulu, but also Jerry. I'm calling you Matulu because that's your name. My name's Yinka. You stick with your name. You don't change it for nobody. I don't change my name to John Dick. When I used to be at school, there'd be always people with Nigerian names and they change them to like Tony. I'd be like, we changed your name to Tony for my name's Yinka. You can't say it.
Oh man,
don't call my name. Don't call it. Learn my name.
Multiple reasons, man. Mutulu is just more.
Don't change your names. Yeah, that's all I've got to say. You keep it real, right? That's what it's about. And I'm going to leave that now to a big thank you to George Schumann. A big thank you to Frank Guy. A big thank you to Ishmahil Blagrove. A big thank you to who's missing, who was on the show that's gone off early. I don't know. Jamila, you're not helping me here. Right?
Geoff. I'm helping you, Geoff.
Said that.
Geoff Schumann.
And a big thank you guys for being on the show. We're going to leave you on that note. Just remember our show is called The Next Generation of the Mangrove 9. It's all about the next generation. It will be shown on DTA Live Radio if you want to catch up on the podcast. And also on our YouTube channel, The Next Generation of the Mangrove 9. And this one's all about education. And you can see from yourselves, this show has been amazing. Jamila, you can end it out.
Thank you, Yinks. I just want to reiterate what Yinks says. We've called all the names. Thank you. And what I would say to the younger people, younger generation is, for me, it's not about titles. So if it's Courttia, I mean, the people who have done, been successful in their fields, whether you find that they're unreachable because their accolades are great, it doesn't matter. They're still human. So if you want to reach out to somebody, just reach out. Try until you succeed in what it is that you want to succeed in. Because, nobody is above anybody.
No one's greater than you. You're the same.
Nobody's greater than, unless you're the higher being. That's the only way you're going to be greater. But other than that, if you feel that you want to do something, you feel you want to talk to somebody, you want some information, you find your channels. Hopefully we will be here in whatever multitude of forms or platforms. But what I'm trying to express to everybody is go for it and reach out. And we're here to help and support. Yeah. We love you all.
We'll be back. And thank you, everybody. And bye.
Thank you, everyone. It's been an honor.
Peace and love. Bye.
Bye. Hi. After we finished recording our show on education, it was brought to Yinka and myself's attention that the national curriculum, the Mangrove 9 story, has been added to the national curriculum on GCSE level, which is fantastic news.